Hi everyone, welcome once again to another session of learning. Today in our English language class, we will be looking at formal and informal letters. How to write formal and informal letters. But before we go on to learning how to write them, first let's look at what formal and informal letters are. Formal letters are used for official or serious communication. Formal letters are used for official or serious communication. When you have something to write about to someone who is not your friend, who is not your family, who you are not relating with on personal level, and there is something you need to communicate to that person. There's not something you need to write to the person about. It has to be a formal letter. It could be to an individual, it could be a company, it could be a group of people, okay? But as long as the person or persons are not your family or friends, then it has to be formal letters. It carries a serious note, okay? So informal letters, on the other hand, are for personal or casual communication. You use informal letters when you are communicating with people who you are friendly with, or people who are family members or pen pals. Pen pals are not so common these days. I would say pen pals are being gradually replaced with social media friends, okay? In those days, we used to have a lot of pen pal thing, and then you find out that using informal letters was one major way of communicating with pen pals. So formal letters are used for official or serious communication, while informal letters, on the other hand, are for personal or casual, not serious communication, and they are for people that you are close to or familiar with. Now, examples of formal letters. Some examples of formal letters are a letter of application. Okay, that is, for instance, maybe you're looking for a job or you're seeking to gain admission into a certain place like school. Okay, so letter of application is an example of such formal letters. That means you need to write it in a formal style. Another example is complaint letters. For instance, maybe there's something you need to complain about to a group, to a company, or to an individual who is not your friend or family. You need to use the formal style to write such letters of complaint. And the third one here is thank you letters. This also is a formal style of writing, especially if it is to people that are not your friends. You can write thank you letters to friends, okay, but in this case we're talking of thank you letters to people who are not your friends or family. So this also takes formal style. Then for informal, examples of informal letters are those letters that you write to friends, family, or pen pals, like I mentioned earlier. These are people you don't need to be so serious with, okay? Your tone doesn't have to be so serious or so straight, so formal. You can relax a little bit when you are writing to people like this, and you are freer to express yourself in your own style than you are when you are doing personal letters, okay? So these are some cases where you use informal style of writing letters. So we're going to look at some examples of formal letters and some examples of informal letters so that we know how to go about writing these letters. It's very important, for us to be able to write formal, especially formal letters. Informal letters, people really don't have challenges, writing those, because the people they are writing to are familiar, they are close to them, they are people they are familiar with, but when it comes to formal letters, these are people that don't know you, and you're going to be judged based on how you put forth your writing. So it's very important for you to know how to do it, because these are not close people, they are not people who are friendly with you, so they are going to judge you using certain standards. So it's important for you to learn how to write in order for you to be able to put forth a good impression before those people, okay? and also it will help you to gain access to some places and be able to get certain things that you would need. So the next aspect we're going to look at now is how will the format that formal letters take, and then the format that informal letters take. Okay, so here we're going to take a look at the basic structure of letters generally, the basic structure of letters, and then we are now going to look at the structure of a formal letter and that of an informal letter. Okay, so for generally the structure a letter takes is you have to have your date there. That's the date the letter is written. Okay, so the date has to be there, and then the greeting or salutation. That is how you address the person you are writing the letter to, how you address the recipient of the letter, like dear Mr. John, or their admission body, or their office of the registrar, or hi John, hi James, hi Sarah. Okay, that's salutation. Now you use any of these depending on the kind of letter you are writing. If it is a formal letter, you can't use hi. Okay, hi is used for informal letters, but dear Mr., dear Mrs., dear admission body and stuff like that are used for formal letters. Okay, so the next one we have here is introduction. Your letter has to have an introduction, and that's the opening paragraph. That is what a kind of mentions the reason for which you are writing that letter. That opening paragraph explains the purpose, the aim of that letter that you are writing, why you are writing it. It could be brief, it could be a little bit long, but it tells the reader or the recipient of the letter why you are writing the letter. And then after introduction, you have the body of the letter. You have the body of the letter. In the body of the letter, you write the main thing that you want to write. Remember, the introduction just briefly talks or touches on the reason that you're writing the letter. But then in the body of the letter, you now explain in details why you are writing the letter. The things you really want to say, you say them in the body of the letter. The details come in the body of the letter. And then after that is the conclusion. The conclusion of the letter, okay, is the closing paragraph that brings the letter to an end. It concludes the letter. It kind of summarizes the things you have written already in brief words, in short form. You know, just summarizes what you've written, or brings out the main important, the main points or the important points of the things you wrote, but in a very short form to bring the letter to an end. That's the conclusion. Okay, it's the last paragraph, and it kind of brings what you have written to an end. And lastly, you have your signature. Your signature. So that signature is the part that carries the writer's name, the name of the writer of the letter, and depending on the type of letter, well, it carries either sincerely, or yours faithfully, or kind regards. That's in the case of formal letter. But if it's informal letter, it can be your love this person, or warm regards this person. You write your name. Okay, so signature is the last part where the name of the writer comes up. We often followed with a closing remark like sincerely, faithfully, yours truly, and different other things. Okay, and that brings the letter to an end. So let's quickly run over this again. This is the basic structure of a letter, whether formal or informal. We're going to specifically look at formal and then informal, but for now, what we're looking at here is the general structure of a letter. So you have the date, that's the date the letter is written. You have the greeting part or salutation part, where you address the recipient of the letter either as dear Mrs. or Mr. or hi, anyhow, the way you address the recipient of the letter, that's the greeting part. And then you have the introduction, which is an opening paragraph that states the reason for the writing of the letter. And then the body of the letter will now explain in details what the writer has in mind, what you're trying to pass across. That's the details of the whole thing. It comes up under the body of the letter. And then you have the conclusion, which is the closing paragraph. Okay? Just like you have the opening paragraph that states the purpose of the letter, the closing paragraph now reiterates everything you have said, but in a very short form. It kind of summarizes, or it closes, or it brings to an end the letter you have written, or the content that you have written in your letter. And after that, you put your signature, or the writer writes his or her signature, which normally includes the name and a closing phrase. It could be sincerely, it could be love, it could be warm regards, it could be kind regards, it could be yours faithfully, yours sincerely. So a lot of closing phrases are used, but depending on the type of letter that is being written. So when we look at formal letters, the specific structure of formal letter and that of informal letter, you'll be able to tell the difference between the two. But this is a general structure. You will see when we look into those other examples. So now we're going to look at the structure of formal letters. What we just looked at now is the structure of letter, the basic structure of letters generally. Okay, but now we're going to specifically look at structure of formal letters. So for formal letters, on the left-hand side of your page, maybe paper, you are using paper, hard copy, or you are working on the computer, soft copy. On the left side of that page, you write your left side, the top side of the left part. You write your name, just the way it is written here. You write your name and your surname. You know, when we say your name, that's your first name and your surname. You write your address, the city you are, the state, and the code. Though code in Nigeria is not so commonly used, but in developed countries they don't joke with codes. But here, you may find people using P.O. Box or PMB, you know, like where mails are sent and received. Okay, so you can city, you write the city where you are, the state, and then the code or your mail address. Then the next space is for email address. Very important. You put your email address there, and then followed by the date that you're writing that letter. But here we just put today's date. Okay, so that today's date refers to the date that the mail or the letter is written. Your name, your address where you live, the city, the state, and the postal code. That's what we mainly use in Nigeria. But for developed countries, you hear zip code and stuff like that. But here we can use your postal code, PMB or PO Box. And then it's followed by email address, your email address, and lastly, the date that you're writing the letter. Now you will leave a gap, leave space underneath, like a line or two. You leave that gap. You can see there is a little gap here. So you leave gap after you've written today's date under your own details or information that you gave on yourself. Then you will write the recipient or the company's name. Now I use the recipient or company's name because sometimes it's not addressed to a company or an institution. It could be addressed to a person, but the person you are not familiar with, like Mr. John. So here you write Mr. John. Then you write the name of the company of Mr. John, because if you are writing to Mr. John and it's a formal letter, the reason you are making it a formal letter is because Mr. John is associated to an organized system. He's associated to an organization or a company. Okay, that's why you are writing a formal letter to him in the first place. So when you write the name, or if it's not a particular person you're addressing it to, you write the company's name. So either the name of the person or the company's name. And then if it's the person's name you wrote, you write the company's name in the next line, the following line. But if you write the company's name from the beginning, then you don't need this second line here. So you just go ahead, write the company's name, and then the address follows. Okay, so you have recipients or company's name, the next line, company's address, then the city or the city, the state, and then the zip code or the postal code for the company. So if you are writing the city, it's not your city this time, it's the city where the company is. It may be the same city as the one you live in, it may not. It may be the same state as the one you live in, it may not be. So you write the city, the state, and the postal code of that company. And then you leave a line gap again before you write their recipient name or their company's name. Remember, whatever you addressed it to here is what you're going to use here. So if you use the recipient's name like Mr. John, when you now start writing there, you will be dear Mr. John, comma, then you now start writing. I'm writing to ... Whatever the reason is for your writing that letter, you now start to explain it. Remember, the first paragraph here will be your introductory paragraph or your introduction paragraph. So you're going to use that as your introduction to state the reason for which you are writing the letter. Okay? Let's go over this again. This is the structure of formal letter. Remember, formal letter is for people you are not familiar with. It's for people that are not your friends, they are not your family. It's for people you have to follow a certain way, a certain standard that has been set down to write a letter to. So the structure for such letter is this. First, you write your name at the top left side corner of your page, whether it's hard copy or soft copy. You write your name followed by your address, the city, the state, and the postal code for you. This first part is your information. The top first part here is your own information, and then your email address, and then today's date. That means today's date is referring to the date that the letter is written by you. After that, you leave a line gap or two. Just leave a space. It may not be a paper or a surface that is ruled, but just leave a little gap, enough to be noticed, and then you move on to the recipient's information. So the first part is your own information, leave a little gap, and you give your own, the company's information or the recipient's information. So you write recipient's name, if it's a person you're addressing it to, or the company's name, if it's a company you're addressing it to. And then if it's a person, the next line should be the company's name. After that, the company's address. Then you have the city, the state, where the company is, and then the postal code for the company. After that, you leave a line gap and address again to the recipient, their recipient name, whatever the name is, or their company's name, if it's a company you are addressing it to. And then you start to write what you need to write. Okay? Remember, the first paragraph talks about the reason for writing, and then the body follows, the body of your letter. That is where you explain in details the reason for writing that letter. And after that explanation in the body part, you go to conclusion where you summarize or bring your letter to a close, and then you sign off your name. Okay? Remember, this part is the salutation where you say their recipient's name or their company's name. This is the salutation. So this basically is the structure of a formal letter. So the next one that we're going to look at is the structure of informal letters. Okay, so we're going to look at the structure of an informal letter. For informal letter, remember we said that it's not so structured, it's not so like formal. You can relax a little bit because you are writing to people you are familiar with. You're writing to friends, you're writing to family, you're writing to probably pen pals or social media friends. So in this case, the tone of the letter is not so formal. It's not so like official. You can use words that are like slangs. It just takes a relaxed tone, when you're writing informal letter. So here, this is the structure it takes. You have to write your name, still on the left top side of the page. It could be soft copy, could be hard copy, paper or internet, or online rather. So just write your name. You write your address under the name, then your city, state, and your postal address, like PMB PO box. And the last part, you write the date that you're writing the letter. That's today's date. That's the day of the letter. Name, address, city, state, code, and then the date. And after that, like you have in the official letter, you leave a space. Okay? You leave some space, and then you write dear friend's name or dear family's name, depending on who you are addressing the letter to. If the name of your friend, for instance, is Anne, for instance, you're going to just write dear Anne, put a comma, then you start writing. I hope this letter finds you well. Dear Anne, how are you doing? Just it's a very relaxed tone, okay? So, but the basic thing here is just try to write your name, your address, your city, and then the date. Every other thing can be, according to your style. But then at the end of it, when you're done writing everything you need to write, like the first paragraph introduces what you're trying to say, then the body, you give the details of what you want to tell your friends or your family. At the end of it, you write the conclusion. There has to be a salutation as well. Remember when we looked at formal letters, we looked at the salutation part. After the three parts, the introduction, the body, and the conclusion, there is the salutation where you will end it with like, yours sincerely, yours faithfully, kind regards, sincerely, cordially. Those are different closing phrases that are used, okay, when you are closing your formal letters. So, but for informal letters, you can use love, Mary. You write your name, love, Mary, or warm regards, comma, you write Mary. Okay? So, this basically is the structure of informal letters. Okay? So, the only thing I would just like to quickly share with us right now are the basic differences between formal and informal letters. What that we're going to look at is the differences between formal and informal letters. Now, the first difference is language and tone. For formal letters, the language is very professional and polite because these people you are writing to, or whoever you're writing to, is not familiar with you. It's not a friend, it's not family. So you have to be professional in your language and polite as well. But in informal letter, because it's either a friend or family or somebody you're familiar with, you use conversational tone or friendly tone. You don't go professional, okay, when you are writing informal letters. So language and tone is one difference between formal and informal letters. Then the second difference is in address and salutation. For formal letters, you find out that you have two addresses. You have your own address and you have the address of the person you are writing to or the company you are writing to. So you have two addresses for formal letters, but for informal letters, you have just your own address and you go ahead and write what you need to write. Also, salutation for formal letters, you use titles and the last names of the recipients. For instance, Mr. Chandler. Assuming the person you're writing to is John Chandler, you won't say Mr. John, you will write Mr. Chandler. But in the case of informal letters, you will just write John, which is the first name. So the name, the way you address the person you're writing to also differs. So for formal letters, you use titles and last names, but for informal letters, you can use first names. Or if it's an auntie, for instance, you're writing to, you just write Auntie Sarah, Auntie John, Uncle John, just like that. So the last part here is structure. The structure of formal letters are very strict, while that of informal letters are relaxed. You can adopt your style, just write it the way you want it to be written. It's more relaxed than formal writing. So these are the basic differences between formal and informal letters. Okay, so here is what we're going to call it a day for this week's English lesson. We hope to see you again next week. So stay safe and stay blessed.